And I'm back. This is a middle perch in the middle of the internet. Today is the 6th of November. I'm MTK on the MIC. Today we're using Lightstream for our environment. So look, you can see my archive site over here, right? Check out my little archive site, right? Here you have all the stuff I did over the years, you know, going all the way back to when I was a little kid. Now, I've been trying to use this thing to make this stuff work. And what I want to do is I want to be able to go and add a scene to this. Okay. I don't know if any of that worked, but I think the send to live button is how you make it work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the screen capture of the thing I want to add. Oh, and I got a mouse too. Look, I don't have to reach over here and clunk things around, which is kind of cool. Know what I mean? All right, so here we go. Can I show you what I want to show you? That's what I want to know. Okay, we're going to send this to live and see if it works. You ready? All right, what are you seeing now? Oh, look at that. You're seeing that. That's cool. That's what I want you to see. Okay, so all right, so yesterday we were talking about Edward Snowden and how Jill Lepore wrote an article regarding she's a Harvard professor and she's a great writer, and she often writes on a wide array of topics, and she's, middle-aged and an American who believes in the system. If we're honest, she's raised in a one-paper town in a rich Connecticut area or Massachusetts area, northeast, part of the country, New England, and did all of the New England things and works for the New Yorker. She is extremely competent and a great writer. We read her here all the time. But she did an article about Edward Snowden, right? And the thing is, the article was somewhat troubling because she chose to make it about whistleblowers. And so she created a dichotomy. And this dichotomy was problematic because this dichotomy of the whistleblower is either a traitor or a patriot. Edward Snowden is either a traitor or he's a patriot. And that's what she throws down. And then she uses that as the context. But that's foolish. And in Counterpunch, they were talking about how there was a CIA analyst who writes for Counterpunch who's pretty competent. And he was talking about how that makes no sense. We have to protect whistleblowers. Protecting whistleblowers is the only way our democracy can be safe, and we have a First Amendment for a reason. And we have, whistleblower protections for a reason. If we start changing that dialogue into, well, they're either a traitor or a patriot, that's just really stupid. And so then I was thinking to myself, we should listen to Edward Snowden himself answering what it was like for him when he decided to do this, And let's see, am I still alive here? I think I am. It shows that I am. So let's listen to Edward Snowden responding to Joe Rogan about this.
So you're in this position where you have this information and you know that these surveillance systems are in place and they're unconstitutional, and you feel this deep responsibility to let the American people know about this. What makes you take the leap?
So this is covered extensively in the book because it took a long time.
I would imagine.
People, yeah, right, exactly. People like to think it's like a cinematic moment where I find this golden document, like the Stellar Wind Report. And that's the closest thing to a smoking gun, right, that exists. But look, if you found that, you can read that later, look at that, and like imagine yourself being like, oh, I'm going to go outside on the courthouse steps and wave this thing and burn my life to the ground, burn my family to the ground. I'm never going to be work again. I'm going to jail for the rest of my life. The question is, what would it take for you to light a match and burn your life to the ground? And for a long time, too long, the answer was nothing, and I'm ashamed of that. It took me so long to get over that hump because I was waiting for somebody else to do it. When I saw people like Ron Wyden on this, when I saw people like the court case that I showed before, where people were actively challenging these programs, right? Journalists had the scent of it. And, you know, there are a lot of people who are going to be in, you know, the YouTube comments or whatever and go, oh, I knew this was happening. No, you didn't.
Well, Bill Bimini.
You had
Bill
Binney. Yeah,
Bill, Bill Binney. He initially was the one that came out and spoke about this issue. And
Bill Binney is part of, shall we say, the group of early NSA whistleblowers who came with Thomas Drake, Bill Binney, Kirk Wiebe, I believe, and Ed Loomis. And these guys all got their doors kicked in. You know, they got harassed by the FBI. Tom Drake, who was a senior executive at the NSA, this is a guy who had a lot to lose, was charged under the same law I was, the Espionage Act. And these guys were doing it earlier during the Bush administration. Some of them were talking to the journalists that, you know, maybe it's alleged. I don't want to put them on the spot. Maybe they deny it, maybe they don't. Leave that to them. But somebody somewhere was informing this reporting, right, that got into the New York Times about the Bush-era warrantless wiretapping program. And eventually journalists put this out there. People knew these capabilities existed. But yeah, then there's the person in the YouTube comments who's like, oh, we knew all about this. It's nothing new. And the thing is, you can know about some programs and not know about others. You can have a suspicion. You can know with a certainty that this stuff is capable or is possible. The capability exists. You can know that the government has done this stuff in the past. You can know they're likely to do it again. You can have all these indications. You can have like the Jewel versus NSA case that's run by the EFF, which is about it's about AT&T setting up secret rooms in their telecommunications facilities where they basically drag all the fibers for their domestic internet communications and like phone communications into a room that's purpose-built for the NSA, and then they bring it out. But AT&T denies it's the NSA. The NSA denies that these things happen or that are done at all, right? And so this is the context. You say you know, and, you know, let's put it the other way. Maybe you do know, right? Maybe you are an academic researcher. Maybe you're a technological specialist. Maybe you're just somebody who reads all the reporting and you actually know. You can't prove it, but you know this is going on. But that's the thing in a democracy. The distance between speculation and fact, the distance between what you know and what you can prove to everybody else in the country is everything in our model of government. Because what you know doesn't matter. What matters is what we all know. And the only way we can all know it is if somebody can prove it, if you can prove it. And if you don't have the evidence, you can't prove it. And of course, when we talk about the earlier stuff, right, like this sort of a more corporatized media, they've got 1,000 incentives not to get involved in this stuff. They need access to the White House. They need these officials to sit down with them and give interviews, right? That's constant content that they need. That's access that they need. They need to be taken seriously. They need to be, admitted to briefers. It is a codependent relationship. And yet, so the only way to make sure people understand this broadly is if we all work together. right? If we collectively can establish a corpus of evidence, right, a body of facts that is so large and so persuasive, it overcomes the natural and understandable resistance of these more corporatized media groups. It overcomes the political and partisan sort of loyalties that all of these political factions in the country do, where they go, it's my president. Even if I don't like this stuff, even if I don't agree with this stuff, I don't want to say it exists. I want to deny it until it's proved, in HD on video, signing the order to do this, that, or the other, because otherwise there's a chance my guy might not get reelected. And that's the only way this kind of stuff can happen. And the sad fact is, the opportunities that we have to prove this, like the moments in history where we do prove something, anything, beyond a reasonable doubt, are so few and so rare that they almost always only come from whistleblowers. And I think that's one of the problems that we have, particularly in the climate movement. Did you look? Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Did you take any comfort from knowing that Obama, when he was running for office and in his Hope and Change website, he had provisions to protect whistleblowers and provisions to reward people? Right? I mean, do you remember all that? I mean, it was eventually redacted, or he eventually deleted it from the website.
But that disappeared it from the website.
Yes, but that was a big part of his program, or what he was running on, was that when people were exposing unlawful activity, he was going to protect those people. Did you take any comfort in that?
Obama also campaigned. Well, Obama also, during his campaign, said he campaigned actively against the warrantless wiretapping, the Bush administration. Because remember, Bush is in the scandal, the height of this, in 2007.
Right.
The election's coming up right after. And he's going, Obama's saying, that's not who we are. That's not what we do. And yet, within 100 days of him becoming president, now he's sitting in that chair. Rather than extinguishing these programs, he embraces them and expands.
Why do you think that is?
More entrenched. I think it's actually, again, what we talked about earlier. First thing, every time a new president comes into the White House, they get their clearances, right? They get read into all this stuff. During the campaign, they get clearances and they get read into and stuff. But when they finally become president, right, now they're the only people who can sign what these are called covert action findings and things like that. Which are basically, the intelligence community wants to assassinate somebody. They want to run this illegal program here, there, or everywhere. And they can't do it because they're executive agencies without that top-level executive sign-off. And so they got to open the vest, right? They got to get these guys on side. And basically every president since Kennedy, they have been successful in what they call fearing up. Where as soon as they come in, they read you the litany of horribles. And they go, these are all the threats that we're facing. And let's be real, it is a dangerous world. It's not just all made up BS. Some of it is, right, where it's inflated. It's not that it's completely false, but they make it sound more serious than it actually is. But there are real bad people out there who are trying to do real bad things. And you have just gone through a hellish election because our electoral politics are so diseased. And now, after you've crawled through fire, you're already thinking 4 years ahead. How do I stay in this seat? And these guys are basically saying, if you don't do X, Y, and Z, this is going to fall on your lap. And the implication, which I don't think they actually say, but every president knows, is these guys can undermine you to death. If you've got the IC against you, right, they can stonewall you. They can put
That's
out
the intelligence
stories
community.
that are going to be problematic for you. Every day.
Ah, and they're lying. Not to mention the fact that they're lying, right? Yeah. Listen to this. Right. That's right. So the point I'm trying to make here is this guy obviously does not sound like a traitor. I don't know how else to say that. I feel like this is one of those things where, you know, uh, there's more nuance to this. And so I was listening to that Snowden thing on Rogan, and you can go find that, obviously. And then I was reading this piece that was a reaction to Jill Lepore's piece. It's called The Central Role of the Whistleblower here. It's by Melvin Goodman. Melvin Goodman is a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy. He's the national security columnist for Counterpunch. He's a professor of government at Johns Hopkins, a former CIA analyst, the author of several books here. And he wrote this in reaction to Jill Lepore's sort of, Harvard professor looking at Snowden's book in the context of whistleblowing and so on. And we have now this whistleblower in the Trump administration as well, which makes all of this relevant. The fortuitous emergence of a courageous whistleblower in the Trump White House and Harvard professor Jill Lepore's pathetically ill-informed review of Edward Snowden's recent book, Permanent Record, are important reminders of the central and difficult role of whistleblowers in any successful effort to restore our democracy. The information provided by whistleblowers is key to the work of congressional oversight, investigative journalism, and informed political debate. Whistleblowers contributed to the knowledge of the crimes of the intelligence community during the Vietnam War and the exposure of Iran-Contra, which led to the creation of intelligence oversight committees in the Congress and a statutory inspector general at the Central Intelligence Agency, respectively. The abuse of secrecy in the recent administrations of George W. Bush, Barack Obama, and Donald Trump, and the safety of silence of most public servants creates a compelling reason for protecting the courage of a whistleblower. Obama, a Harvard-trained lawyer and former professor of constitutional law, made it particularly difficult for whistleblowers and displayed a stunning disregard for the separation of powers, which is currently being violated. He inexplicably contributed to the need for whistleblowers by weakening the traditional institutions for oversight in the national security process, the Office of the Inspector General. Obama left key vacancies at the CIA and the Department of State for long periods during his administration. And Trump has tried to reduce funding for IGs at the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of State, and the Environmental Protection Agency. Lepore's review of Snowden's book in the current issue of The New Yorker is a typical example of the lack of support given to whistleblowers from the press and the public. In raising the false dichotomy of Snowden as either a patriot or a traitor, Lepore could have noted that after leaving the Department of Justice, former Attorney General Eric Holder referred to Snowden as a, quote, public servant. And in discussing Snowden's decision to leave the country and to avoid, quote, other avenues available for someone, sorry, I got this new thing and it's going too fast. Other avenues available for someone whose conscience was stirred, close quote. It should be noted that a prior whistleblower from the National Security Agency, Thomas Drake, who Snowden spoke about there briefly, did exactly that, and the Obama administration outrageously used the Espionage Act against him. Lepore concludes that an, quote, age of whistleblowing isn't a sign of a thriving democracy, close quote. But we will not have a thriving democracy without protection for whistleblowers. The 1989 Whistleblower Protection Act, moreover, does very little to protect whistleblowers from condemnation and even reprisal. When I testified to the Senate Intelligence Committee in 1991 against the confirmation of Robert M. Gates as Director of Central Intelligence, there were sworn affidavits from former colleagues at the CIA who collaborated my testimony. Two of these colleagues, Carolyn Eekdahl and the late John Hibbets, testified to Gates's manipulation of the intelligence process. As a result, they were not allowed to return to their offices in the Directorate of Intelligence and had to find an assignment outside of the Directorate. Both Eekdahl and Hibbets were also immediately summoned for polygraph examinations in an effort to intimidate them and perhaps curtail their employment. ABC News reported that Eekdahl and Hibbets were told that their careers were, quote, over, close quote, for contacting the Senate Intelligence Committee with comments critical of Gates. Senator Warren Rudman, Republican of New Hampshire, even accused me and other Gates's critics of, quote, McCarthyism, pure and simple, close quote, in a successful effort to stop additional CIA intelligence analysts from testifying against Gates. As a result, Senate Intelligence Committee Chairman David Boren, Democrat of Oklahoma, publicly praised the, quote, courageous analysts, close quote, who cooperated with the committee and promised to intervene on their behalf, quote, at the slightest hint of retribution, close quote. I hope that the current chairman of the committee, Richard Burr, Republican of North Carolina, issues his own support for the current whistleblower, but I would not be optimistic. The sad fact is that Senator Boren could do nothing to protect the whistleblowers, and the 1989 Whistleblower Protection Act is no barrier to condemnation and even reprisal. When Republicans were in charge of the Senate Intelligence Committee, there were individuals who contacted congressional staffers with issues that required scrutiny, but they were warned that they would not receive a friendly reception from key committee members. The current whistleblower, moreover, has been ridiculed by the President of the United States as a, quote, political person, carrying out a, quote, political hack job, close quote, and dismissed by Fox News as one of those, quote, deep state people. Now, that's interesting, especially after listening to what Snowden just said about deep state people, right? They're just the ones who've been there the longest. It's time for the Congressional Intelligence Committees to step up and carry out its constitutional responsibility. An obvious step would be for the Senate to fill its 3 seats on the Merit Systems Protection Board, which is charged with adjudicating reprisals against whistleblowers. Although ordinary whistleblowers in the government can go directly to congressional oversight committees, whistleblowers in the intelligence community require the approval of their particular office of the special counsel or the office of the inspector general to do so. It will take an unusually courageous individual to act in the future in view of these various barriers, in addition to the experience of the current whistleblower. So what I find fascinating about this conversation from Edward Snowden to the current whistleblower is that each time one of these whistleblowers finally has the opportunity or takes the opportunity to expose something, the deep state or the government, even after they have to react, they make it much harder for anybody ever to do that, instead of seeing openness as the way to do it. And I really encourage you all to go check out Snowden's interview done by Joe Rogan on his podcast. And I also, I believe Edward Snowden should be pardoned. We should pardon Edward Snowden and put him in charge of an oversight duty regarding the NSA's surveillance. What better person to do that? I don't know. We're living in such horrible times in this regard. Total information awareness. Sad. Okay, I'm going to shut this down. It's been 30 minutes, and I want to check everything out today, so I'm going to see how it worked. I hope it worked.